Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Cory Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. Today we have Derek Miner with us. Derek has been a friend of the Gentleman Project for a long time. Derek is somewhat a internet marketing pioneer, I guess you could say. 20 years ago, he was kind of on the forefront of what internet marketing was, what the internet was going to become, what businesses needed to do to be online and present with their companies. And he's had just this amazing string of he's got the Midas touch, and everything and everywhere he goes, he kind of just turns this culture into a wonderful place that people love to work. He was with aha.com, founded orangesoda.com. He's now with Lemonade Stand, and they're a full service marketing firm. A great guy all around. And if I had to describe Derek in 2 words, it would be outrageously kind. Just so that the people on the podcast know, we're doing a remote today with Derek, and he happens to be sitting in front of a whiteboard that is full of messages from his kids, and in scribbles and doodles and a whole bunch of different pictures that they've drawn. It's like the perfect backdrop for the Gentleman Project podcast. An involved dad that obviously has his kids come to the office and spend some time while he's there working. So thanks for joining us today, Derek.
Thanks so much, Kirk and Cory. Sure appreciate the opportunity. You mentioned pioneer. Makes me sound a little bit old. It was funny. I was actually talking to my son the other day, and he said, he says, "Dad, were you born in the olden days?" And I didn't even know how to respond to that. And I just started laughing. He says, "Because I was born in the newer days."
I guess if you could say last century, right?
Yeah,
that was right. About the time. That was about the time that you were really getting involved and things were taking off. Was right around 2000.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And anything with a .com after it was getting funded, and that was a crazy, wild ride. The cowboy days of the internet.
Yeah.
You've been around doing amazing stuff ever since. So, although you're an amazing marketer, we talk on the Gentleman Project about how you're plugging in, what you're doing with your family and your kids to be more involved and to make a difference in your kids' lives. So knowing the type of person that you are at work, I kind of want to dig in and find out, what are you doing at home right now, Derek? What's your life like? Tell us about your family. And what are you doing right now that you could say, hey, I could share this and it'd make an impact to our listeners?
Oh, I appreciate that. Man, at home right now, it's really busy. We're right in the thick of it. I think we have our oldest is 16. He's just awesome. A daughter who's 14, and then 3 boys who follow him, and then a little princess at the end. And so our youngest is 2.5, and it's so much fun at our house right now. And I mean, some of the things that we're trying to be really intentional. I think the last year's been a challenge in a lot of ways, and what we did is just tried to find time to spend together and to get outside. And I think that's been one of the things that's been the most impactful for me, especially growing up with loving, amazing, caring parents who believed in me and gave me opportunities. I wanted to do the same thing for them.
So what are some of the things, Derek, that your kids have taught you through this COVID time? I feel like we've all spent a little more time with our kids and at home a little bit. Are there some things that surprised you through that time?
I think more than anything, just how resilient kids are, and how, every day is a new opportunity and a new time and day to go and explore. Again, one of my favorite things that I've done that I learned from another friend is writing down really cool things that my kids say, which are absolutely just hilarious. He said, "Dad, let's go explore some adventures." And so I'd say over the last year, we've tried to explore a lot of adventures together as a family. It was a really challenging time. Actually, interestingly enough, when I started at Lemonade Stand, which, it turns out I can't get enough citrus in my life.
You got orange soda and now Lemonade Stand, right?
And we started, and there's a lot of, really interesting things with businesses and other challenges. And then kids trying to figure out, man, how do we finish up this year and then go into summer? And then, getting ready for the following year when things seem to be changing rapidly. It was just amazing to see how resilient kids are and how they always look for opportunities to lift and help each other and to learn some fun new things as well. We went on some great adventures here in Utah. That's what was great about having the mountains so close. I'd say the one thing that I've tried to be really intentional with is something that I grew up with too, which is spending a lot of time outside and in the out of doors, because there's so much you can learn, so much perspective that can be gained, and insight, and especially being with kids where you're not distracted, you're not in front of a screen, and learning just, real life lessons, together. We spent a lot of time skiing, which was a ton of fun, together as a family. In fact, we had our little 2.5-year-old skiing, and we had the entire family on the hill. And that's always a great opportunity to be together.
Awesome. So Derek, you've been a part of a Gentleman Project Lunch Club, right?
Yes.
You have, you've chosen a place, and there's a group of people that you get together with who I would assume, based on, I know the people in your group, they're people you could definitely call mentors, in the fatherhood space. Tell us about what a Gentleman Project Lunch Club is, first of all, and then what you've gotten from those meetings, and how it's changed the way you parent.
Well, the cool thing is we have another one coming up here really soon, and I'm so excited about it. So Dave Norton and Jeff Flam and Rob Schallenberger and I, which are just extraordinary examples to me. We've been getting together regularly, and what have I learned from them? Man, I could probably spend the entire podcast just talking about lessons from them. One thing that I remember that Jeff talked about is something that he does with each of his kids when they turn a certain age. And I remember walking away from one of the lunches saying, I'm going to spend more. And and as I think about it too, Rob does this and Dave does this, where they spend one-on-one time with each of their kids every single, at least monthly. So it's just them, and having 6 kids, making sure you're carving out time for each one of them individually. That's been a huge takeaway from me, but man, that's been an incredible experience for me to be with my kids as well. Just one-on-one when it's just them, right? We do a lot of things together as a family, which is awesome. But that's been really, really big for me. One of many things that I get out of there, but we're really just sharing, experiences, what's working well, what's not. And this is why, maybe we should do a part 2 after lunch next month. But I continually learn from people who inspire me, and man, those 3 sure are great examples to me.
Yeah, well, anybody who's a regular of the podcast has met Jeff Flam and they've met Rob Schallenberger. So you've got 3 of the 4 guys so far that meet in your club have been guests on the podcasts, and they've been some of our listener favorites so far. So, you'll have to let us know how that goes. Just so if people don't know what a Gentleman Project Lunch Club is, and it can be breakfast, whatever you'd like it to be, is you choose a place, you get together usually once a month, and you talk about, like you said, what's going well, what's not going well, and then you make commitments to each other. You say, this is what I'm going to work on because this isn't going well. These are the things that I'm going to try. The next month when you come back, instead of being judged for not doing them or praised for doing them, is you just have an accountability group right there that says, hey, how did it go? You said you were struggling with this last month. You said you were going to try this, and somebody writes it down and they say, hey, how did it go? Yeah. That's definitely been a blessing in my life. Those relationships have been great. So
yeah, Derek, I was going to ask you, you mentioned growing up and your parents. Talk to us a little bit about what you learned growing up that's important to you, that from your parents that you're passing on to your kids.
No, I appreciate that. I grew up on a farm, and we had horses and chickens and all sorts of cool animals that I had to take care of. A lot of times it was pretty scary, but they don't feed themselves. And I think having a responsibility at a young age taught me a really important lesson that I needed to show up. And if they didn't, get taken care of, then it was a real problem. I remember one year, our pipes inside of our barn froze, and we had to bucket water from all the way across. It was brutal, and it's cold, and you've got two, those Homer gallon buckets you get at Home Depot, and you've got those full of water, and you're walking over there, and all the horses are lined up just watching me like, I wonder what's going through their head. They're like, this is a joke, right? And then I'd walk over to the trough and I'd pour it, and literally, I'll tell you one thing that I learned that was hard is I showed up late one day, and they were all standing there looking at me. And I went over there and I saw that they'd been piling where the ice was in the water. And I remember pouring it in there and them just drinking as fast as they could. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I had forgotten overnight? And so I learned this at a really young age, growing up. But man, being born to loving, caring parents who believed in me and gave me opportunities, and who really taught me the value of work, is something that is always been ingrained in my heart and mind, to be able to teach my kids the love of music. My father is a concert pianist as well. And it turns out it skips a generation, because my son is now, well, all four of my six kids are in piano lessons, and my kids have toured around. But that's another really important thing that they taught me is the, the love of music and sports and relationships, and having, the opportunity to do extraordinary things. And they gave me the belief when I was young too, that I could do anything. And I believed that. And it was really important. I'll never forget one of the things that my parents would always tell me, just a few things that stick with me. In fact, they still say it. I saw them this morning as they're getting older. And it was really interesting as I was getting ready to leave. They're like, hey, I love you more than words can say. And I remember them telling me that when I was younger, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And then I was talking, and my dad was always kind of follow that up with, hey, you'll understand how much I love you and what this means when you have your own kids. And guess what? I get it. Now I really get it. And that was just so powerful to me, because sometimes words are inadequate, to describe how much you love and care. And I'm just so grateful, because I know there's a lot of other challenges that are out there, and to be able to have parents who express that love to me is just so critical. But, my dad had a little bit of that, but he didn't feel that kind of love from his father growing up. And he could have, said, I'm going to do kind of the same thing, but he chose, and I think was really intentional the way that he showed up in my life, which I'm so grateful for. In fact, he always taught me this too. He says, when the moment of opportunity arrives, the time for preparation is past. I think that's another kind of thing that just echoes in my mind that my dad taught me. And in fact, he was speaking to a group of executives in Salt Lake City. And I think I was 12 or 13 years old. And he said, hey, Derek, why don't you come with me? And right after we'll go. And I think we were going to go do something together. But I went in there and I listened to him. And I remember just sitting in the back of the room saying, man, my dad's so awesome. It's so fun to see him in a pair of Wrangler jeans on horses. And then to see him in this executive boardroom meeting presenting to everyone. He was talking about empowerment. And the way that he talked about how to empower your team and what that really meant. And how when that moment of opportunity presents itself, preparation is past. And he always would take a piano with him when he'd present as well. And they were expecting him to play the piano. And one of the executives say, well, do you really, do you teach this also in your home and to your kids? And he said, absolutely, we do. And here I am. I'm just back in the back. Of course, I didn't have a phone. I was just drawing or something like that. And the next thing I knew, my dad was asking me to come to the front and play on the piano. I'm like, oh my gosh. So talk about the moment of preparation being totally gone. And here I'm like, I got to play. And he says, well, let me just show you. My son's been working on this piece. It was, this is what's so crazy is I learned a lot of songs growing up. But this was, Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. I just learned it, in fact, when I was there. And so I started playing it. And I was actually pretty comfortable in front of this big group. And when I finished, the CEO said, this is incredible to be able to see someone you're really talking about, here's what we say we do at home. And here's actually what's happening. And I'll never forget that. In fact, my dad wrote a book and he included that section in there, but it was just, that's what my parents instilled in me. Some of those things, just love and a deep appreciation to live life.
Derek, you have a reputation in the business world of someone who builds teams and builds culture. And I imagine that living in your home, you've taken some of those lessons either from work and implemented them at home, or you've taken them from home and the things you've learned from your parents and implemented them at work. What would you say would be like your top two things about building culture and building family culture that moves the whole family in the same direction in their goals and their roles?
Man, it's a really good question. I think we're striving every day to do the best that we can. Because building a winning culture, culture is so much more than, all the great things that you do. I think culture really manifests itself when challenges arise, and when there's hard times, and who shows up for each other and how do they show up for one another. I've constantly been inspired by my younger kids. In fact, when I dropped them off this morning for school, I always say, "Hey, love you guys. Have an amazing day." And then I was about to say it, and my little he just turned 7. He was counting down the days. It was the cutest thing ever. He's like, "Dad, there's only 79 more days till my birthday." "Hey, Dad, there's only 72 more days till my birthday. 49 more days till my birthday." "Hey, Dad, ask Siri how many more days till my birthday." His birthday was yesterday, and he said, "Dad, today is my birthday all day." It's the cutest thing. So, anyways, as I'm dropping him off at school this morning, I said, "Hey, I love you guys so much." And then I was about to say something, and he just said, "Hey, Dad, and we'll say something nice to someone else." and so I was just like, oh my gosh, he kind of finished my sentence for me. And it was one of those moments where I just sat there after I dropped him off. I'm like, oh, this is awesome, because there's so many life lessons that you try to teach in the moment, and you wonder if they're even listening, how that's going to come across. But we're far from perfect in terms of what we try to do, but there's things that what's so fun, in building a winning culture. I think everything starts with trust. And creating a safe environment for your kids where there's accountability and responsibility, high levels of communication, there's kindness, there's service, and creating a pattern where they feel safe and they hold us accountable. It's interesting. Every night, we try to get together and say our prayers and read right before we go to bed. And here's my cute little 2.5-year-old daughter at the very top of the stairs holding our book. And she said, "It's time for scriptures, Dad." And I'm like, oh my goodness, and so we've tried to do things like that to really help, overall. But I'll tell you, this really crystallized for me a few years ago. As you think about how am I investing in my kids and how am I helping them to be better and to think and to look out for others. And obviously my older kids have a lot of the stories because they've been around with us the longest. But I'll never forget when I was, my kids skied competitively, and my son, his last year of skiing with the team, he made a choice. He's like, I don't want to ski on Sundays. And I'm like, well, okay, when you get to this level, you need to start skiing all the time and accumulate a certain number of points, which I thought was really interesting. And I said, all right, here's your races. We sat down. Here were the metrics, right? As you think about how does this tie into business? Here's what you have to do. Here's what your performance has to look like at every single race. You have to finish, in the top 50 in the region to qualify for this. He's like, that's my goal. That's what I want to do. He did really, really well in all these races and kept his commitment to himself and to us, and which I thought was really interesting. He got enough points to qualify for this regional ski event, based on that commitment. The final event was to be held, and they were going to do a practice. Well, leading up to this event, and it was out of state, and he went up there with his team and was practicing. And one of his friends, before he left, his dad had ALS, and tragic, had been dealing with it for a really long time. He passed away, and found out that the funeral, he passed away literally, I think it was like 2 or 3 days before he was leaving to go up out of town. And they found out when the funeral was. He said, well, I'm going to go and race and we'll see how it goes. And he raced and did really well. And he found out that he had one more. Well, actually, it started snowing really hard, and they pushed the day back, the race day back. And he said, Dad, he says, I'll have a lot of other opportunities to ski in my life, but I won't have the opportunity to be at my friend's dad's funeral again. And even though he wanted to ski there so bad, he ended up coming home and being with his friend. And that was one of the things for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, we didn't tell him, no, you can't ski on Sundays. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. We said, you can do all these things. And to have him make that choice, man, it was, my wife and I just looked at each other and we're like, this is incredible, you know? And he since has just continued to surprise us with being, you know, making decisions like that. So are we trying? Awesome. Yeah, we're doing our very best.
That's really cool to see character manifest itself in your kids, isn't it?
No question.
So you grew up on a farm, and it sounds like your kids are hard workers based upon the fact of some of the instruments and sports they've been playing. I think that's a topic we all care about a lot as a parent, is how to teach our kids hard work, but it's harder when you're not on a ranch. Talk to us about what are the ways that you and your wife have taught your kids that principle of hard work, focus, dedication, that kind of thing.
Yeah, good questions. I think about that. Each one of them are a little bit different, as we know. You know, for all of us dads, what works for one doesn't work for all of them. Dang it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it, you know, such a great opportunity for us to spend time one-on-one and understand really what's most important for each of them and what their goals are, and giving them opportunities to try a lot of different things and to explore and experience a lot of different things. Maybe just a few examples. When we go out and we work, you know, we don't have someone come and take care of our yard. Our kids do. Yeah. And we try to make it a game, and it's actually a lot of fun when we go out there and say, hey, we're gonna see how many piles of weeds we can pull and what we can do. And when you turn it into an experience, you know, more than just like, all right, roll up your sleeves, all right, we're showing up out here and making it happen, you know. And a lot of these things translate into other opportunities. For instance, again, my oldest son, he practices piano 2 hours a day and is competing on the piano and has traveled internationally to play. And it's inspiring to see him, even though there's times when he doesn't want to go in and sit down on the piano and play, that he still finds time to do it. And he looks back at that. And then I think the other siblings see that too. And my daughter's really loves tennis, and she spent a lot of time focusing on working really hard to play tennis. And then my next son in line, he's got the gift of the piano as well. And so my oldest son would be playing the piano. He'd come in and he'd hear him, like, was that Gavin in there playing? No, it's Austin, our younger. And so we were like, oh my gosh, he's got something here. And then putting that towards that. But having him spend the amount of time with the piano that my older son does, it doesn't really happen. So we have to change the game a little bit. With him. And then I think about my next son, who really loves golf, and he's got a really good little swing, and it's so fun to be out with him and to see, you know, golf's frustrating and really hard, and it takes a lot of time to get really good at it. And I'm like, all this stuff just takes really hard work. But we also, we invite them to help with the laundry and all the chores around the house, even though we don't live on a farm. Giving an opportunity to take responsibility for ourselves. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it's an absolute disaster, you know, to try to get them motivated and say, why are we doing this? This is so hard. Work is so hard. Let's go do this. And I would say, hey, we're going to do this, and then we can go play. And this is where we also try to mountain bike a lot as a family. And you know, a lot of them just say, hey, can we just be at the uphill? I said, we got to earn the uphill. And I said, it's the exact same thing in life, right? Where we want to have these great experiences together. Everything we do requires work. So I don't know, Cory, if that answers the question. If there's any follow-up, what are we doing? I don't know. We're not doing a lot of things well, but, you know, we're trying to make it fun and have them, you know, reflect back and say, you know, I learned something, you know, as a result of this.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like what you've done is you've identified something in each one of your kids' lives that they're passionate about, and then you support them in that role, you know, whether it be piano or golf or mountain biking, and you let them know that you're behind them and you'll be with them no matter what, but you kind of give them that environment of, I can learn hard work. Doesn't have to be, shoveling stalls at the ranch. But I identify with that. My wife and I had a goal that we would have an opportunity for our kids to learn outdoor work.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty fun story that I've been told my whole life is my grandfather was put to work at 10 years old. They lived in Stone, Idaho. He had his own horse, and he was responsible to take those cows. Great grandpa was a dairy farmer, and he'd take the cows out to the West Hills every day. And at night, he'd have to go get them and bring them in. And if he didn't take them out and bring them in every day so that they could feed, they couldn't milk, and the family didn't eat. And grandpa learned from a very, very young age at, 10, that I have an integral part in the culture of this family, and I play a huge role in the success of this family running. And sometimes I feel like, I want to give that experience to my kids, although I don't have thousands of acres and a dairy herd to let them have that same experience. You want to give them that responsibility. And I agree with you. Sometimes I think it'd be easier just to do it yourself than to argue with your kids about doing it. Like, whose responsibility is it to vacuum? And by the time you find the kid whose responsibility it was to vacuum,
it could have been done.
Vacuumed it, and it probably would have been done better in the first place. But that's not the point.
That's right.
So what do you guys do in your home when it comes to chores and things like that? Do you have structure of like who's responsible for certain things? And if those things get done or don't get done, or they're natural consequences, or, maybe help us understand a little bit what it's like in the Miner household for your kids to grow up and have those responsibilities. I think everybody'd love a kid that would sit down and play beautiful music at the piano for 2 hours every afternoon. But
well, I'll tell you, it didn't sound good, a few years ago, but man, it does now. And now as we're going through, different ages, them plucking on the keys with one hand, and then you can see, what it's like when you practice, you see that end and what the end goal is. But I'll tell you too, Kirk, as you mentioned, dairy farming is no joke. One of my really good friends has a dairy farm, and I actually took my kids down there. I said, I want them to come down and experience this. And then I'll come back to, what does it look like at the Miner household? They walked in this dairy farm and they're like, oh my gosh, it smells so bad, even though they've been around horses and other animals. But dairy farming, let me tell you what, that is work. And there is work. No vacations from that. And I think it was a novelty while we were there from the morning until that, and, where we were experiencing all that. But I'm like, no, this happens every single day. And if you don't show up again, it's the same thing. You don't eat, you don't get anything. So, what we're trying to do is give them basic responsibilities, and then try to, really praise them for the success in doing really small things. I was just thinking this morning as my daughter woke up and she was doing her own laundry, and she made muffins for the family as they woke up. And then there's others were just like, hey, this needs to happen. They're like, oh my gosh, do I have to do this again? I emptied the dishwasher like 25 days ago, So do we have a job chart per se? No, we've tried it and it really didn't work. We all just say, hey, look what needs to be done around you, which we hope we're trying to create awareness within our space. Cause when things are clean and everything's happier, when things are picked up. And so we start with small things and try to celebrate those successes at every age, no matter where they are, what they're doing. Cause again, what my 16-year-old is capable of is much different than, my little princess who just, if I ask her to do something and she goes and does it, my heart just melts all over the floor.
Derek, I've been thinking lately about trying to give my kids an aha moment, because they've grown up in this very somewhat affluent area with affluent neighbors, that kind of a thing. And I'd like to get them to see the world differently, right? I'm thinking about taking them to an orphanage or building houses in a third world country, something like that. Have you done anything with your kids, or how do you show them that they're not necessarily growing up like the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cory. And this is something, we're trying to be even more intentional about, because I think empathy, especially at a young age, empathy is really understanding what people's circumstances are. And a lot of times we can say, oh, I feel so bad, and that's never happened to me. But when it happens, it's a totally different scenario. I think just recently we had the opportunity to do a food drive in our neighborhood. And I'll tell you who showed up and who was the most excited were our two youngest boys. they jumped in, they were ready. Cause we told them, what we were doing. And we took a minute just to talk about why, and they're like, wait a second, what are we gathering food for? And it makes them think about things a little bit differently. And I love it. In fact, I've got a picture of them in the back of a truck, both just flexing their muscles with this entire truck bed that we'll fill up because of the generosity of our amazing neighborhood and community, and rallying around this food drive. But they talked about that for a long time. Another experience that I had with our three oldest, this was about 4 years ago. We went to Guatemala as a family, and it was, talk about an eye-opening experience. I hadn't been to Guatemala. My wife had been to Central America a few times, but I hadn't, and my kids hadn't. And to just see and experience that firsthand, to see, what it looks like when people literally, you walk out of your front yard and there's the crops and they're out there working. And we went and we were actually walking through these onion fields. And the cool thing is my three oldest, I've been in this Spanish immersion, in school. And so they've learned a little bit of Spanish, and to see them speak with these other kids that were their ages. And here are these kids working right alongside their parents, hand watering from canals with these buckets, splashing these onions to water them. Again, back to the point, if they don't do it, then they don't eat and don't provide. And that was huge for all of us. And we talk about that experience. And I think really molding, the older three too, in terms of life decisions and how they want to show up and give back to other people, because it's great. And when we talk about, hey, building and developing your talents are really for the intent to bless and help and lift other people. And when we see that with that purpose is really what we're trying to do and to be intentional around showing that. But there's so many opportunities all around us, Cory, even in some of these more affluent areas, some of the loneliest people, and the opportunity even just to reach out. And, we had some of our kids draw fun little cards. Again, it would take way less time for me to just write out a note, but I wanted each of them to do it too, and go take it to, a neighbor who may have been struggling or suffering. Because ultimately, I think all these experiences in life can get us outside of ourselves. And I think one of the greatest ironies in life, and one of the things I talk to my kids about a lot, is the more we think about ourselves, the unhappier we are. So counterintuitive, right, to everything in this selfie world that we live in, where it's like, live your best self, go and put you ahead of everything else, is just the kind of this false narrative that we have right now. And the irony is, I know people who have everything who aren't happy at the core. But the minute we think about other people and put them ahead of our own needs, the happier we are. I don't get it. I really don't. But the irony is, whenever I've had those experiences, my kids have had those experiences, they feel better about themselves. I certainly feel better. And you think about the person that you just were able to impact in some small way. And I think about it the same way, where other people have reached out to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like, I think about, an experience that was, absolutely, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. My wife was expecting our fifth, and her water broke at 24 weeks, 25 weeks. And this is not good. And we have 4 kids at home. One who is 18 months old is the youngest. And we go down to the hospital and they're like, hey, guess what? Your wife's staying here. I'm like, come again? What am I going to do with these other 4? While I try to work. And this was right during a transition. Actually, I was transitioning out of orange soda, and I'm like, man, I'm starting a new opportunity and I've got to give them everything. My kids need me. And to see neighbors, friends, everyone just show up and help me in my time of need was absolutely unbelievable, and taught me so much too, in terms of how we can show up for everybody. Because honestly, you reach out to just about anybody in your contact list right now and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you doing? Because guess what? Every single one of them probably has stuff going on. And it doesn't take very long. And that's what's so amazing about the technology that we have today that helps connect us and keep us aware of other people, but really just getting outside of ourselves.
Yeah, that's one of the good things about technology is you do kind of know what's going on in other people's lives more than you would otherwise. So if there's a positive side to that, to social media, that's probably it.
Yeah.
So Derek, you've had, for the last 20 some odd years, you've been in a space, an entrepreneurship space that you are always out kind of flushing the bushes to see the next thing that's going to come up. As your kids are getting older, have you been able to integrate them at all into some of the business opportunities that you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can see from my board behind here, they love coming into my office and drawing. That's why I can't erase it. I think I'm just going to keep it there and have them keep adding to it because 4 of them have all contributed amazing artwork there. But the entrepreneurship it is a true roller coaster up and down, and there's highs and there's extreme lows. And I think what we've tried to do is share with our kids, at every step of the way, to just be grateful and enjoy every, we think about when we eat things, really trying to savor and take time to enjoy what we have. I'm trying to do that with all the moments that we have, because it goes so fast. But with entrepreneurship, again, there's amazing times, there's really high highs, and there's low lows as well. But one of the things that we've talked to our kids is, and they ask me what I do, and I bring them to my office and I explain to them, how things work and how money works. And again, another example, because my son, all of them have worked and mowed lawns. And my son actually started tuning skis and getting really good at it because he was racing, and he was then tuning for the other kids. And then my 3 older kids, or the next 2, started learning how to tune skis, and they had their friends would bring their skis over and they'd send them Venmo. I'm like, that's how it works, you guys. And then, then he started tuning more skis. And this last year, he's like, Dad, take down my website because I actually don't have enough time to tune all these skis. And then he also rides bikes, and he's tuning bikes now and things like that. But what was really interesting, and hopefully this comes back, Kirk, to the question is, how are we teaching them and showing them, real life skills and in the world of providing for yourself and being self-sufficient, I think is one of the most important things that we can teach our kids. He wanted to work at a bike shop, and it was last year. He's like, hey, I want to work this summer. I'm like, yeah, guess what? No one's hiring. It's COVID. Everything's shut down. And so we started talking. He's like, Dad, I've reached out to all these companies. So I talked to him, and I kind of had this in my mind all along. I'm like, here's what you should do. We spent time together putting together, a little resume, which really didn't have much. And then here's how you email. Here's how you reach out. Here's how you build relationships with people. And he's like, Dad, I haven't heard back from anybody. Shocker. Right. And
bike stores shouldn't have any bikes to sell in 2020.
No, and so I said, here's what I'd recommend. I said, why don't you go in? And he sent a series of follow-ups. Did you hear back? Hey, we're not hiring it right now. We'll keep we'll keep your name and information, because he's been in the shop a lot. And so he's like, okay, whatever. I'll just mow lawns and keep doing stuff like that. And I said, Gavin, if you really want to work there, you should just go ask him if you can work for free and learn. And he went in there. He says, hey, I know I've applied here. He says, I know I love bikes. I really want to just learn, on the job. Can I work for free? And they said, you can start on Monday. And you guys, he worked for almost 5 months for free without pay all summer. And in October, they offered him a part-time position while he was going to school. And he still works there today. And so that's one of the things. And again, my wife deserves all the credit, but the fact that he showed up and he kept a commitment, and he said, I want to work for free. And he did it. And he said, here's when I'm available. And he'd show up. And he said, Dad, sometimes we don't have things to do. I'm like, well, do you see opportunities around the shop? And he would look around, and he said, and he'd clean the floor, and he'd rearrange things and find ways to add value. And so that's one of the things I think with some of the younger kids, too. We try to show them opportunities to add value in other people's life, because really, as you do, that's when opportunities present themselves.
You mentioned your wife a few seconds ago. I know in my life, if my wife didn't inspire me to be a better husband and a better man, I wouldn't be who I am today. What kind of things has your wife taught you about being a great father and a gentleman?
Man, I think the only reason that I've been able to do anything is because of her. She has always encouraged me and always been there for me. And in turn, I've tried to be there for her. But I talk about the kids and all the cool stuff that they're doing. It's really because of her and everything that she does. I think we all know that. So she deserves all the credit in the world. I actually had the opportunity to work with her dad, and which was really interesting. I think that's probably the only reason that he let me marry her, is because he saw what I was like and had some work ethic. But actually, the funniest thing is we knew each other through mutual friends, and I remembered her last name. And then when I was introduced to the CFO of this company, it's like, oh, that's the same name. And then I saw her walk into the office one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's her. So I'm like, okay, I gotta, so I remember going in and asking him, I'm like, hey, I'd like to take your daughter out. He's like, actually, I've got someone else I want to say. I'm like, oh, that wasn't good. Because he, my wife's mother passed away when she was very young, and he was just an incredible provider and gave my wife amazing experiences as she grew up. And I always wanted to be the kind of husband and father that she had in her, and her dad as well. And that's been a huge, always still trying to measure up to that. But man, she's amazing. She's the one, as you guys know, makes everything run, makes everything possible for me to do what I can do to best provide, for them. But I want to do whatever I can to make her life better. And ultimately, when you think about, kind of my definition of what does it mean to be a gentleman, and it's really, helping someone to feel comfortable, and even being uncomfortable to make someone comfortable. Because there's too many things in life that cause a lot of discomfort and pain, and really helping people feel loved, helping them feel accepted, helping them feel appreciated, valued, and important is what I hope my behavior demonstrates for her, because I know that's what she does and how she shows up for all of us.
Fantastic definition, Derek. Thank you. We didn't even have to ask the question. That's how in tune with the Gentleman Project Derek Miner is. He knows we're going to ask this question next. A gentleman is somebody that other people enjoy being around. And it's because of the way they make them feel.
Yep.
And so whether it's a woman or whether it's a man, you just described the way that your wife inspires you. And whatever you want to call that, when you're around people that make you feel better about yourself, then I think that you can count that as being a gentleman. Mm-hmm. Derek, thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. It means a lot to us, and we are appreciative of your friendship. You'll have to let us know how your Gentleman Project Dads group goes this week. Tell all those guys hi. We appreciate you so much being with us today.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate you and all the good you do. And to all the dads out there, let's go. Let's make it happen.
Let's do all in,
yeah,
right?
That's right. Thanks, Cory. Thanks so much, Kirk.
Join us next week on the Gentleman Project podcast. We have new episodes every Monday. We invite you to follow the Gentleman Project podcast on any of the social media platforms and any of the podcast platforms that you consume your social media and podcasts. Find us, follow us, and if you have recommendations, if you have feedback, if you just want to say hi, shoot us a message, and we would be glad to talk with you. So have a great week. Thanks again, Derek Miner, for joining us. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Have a great week.